I really feel that women have got a lot to give to birding. I feel like our voice needs to be amplified. I would prefer not to have a separate group that's only for women, but unfortunately, it appeared the only way we were going to make a change.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the Birding Today podcast, where birders come together to discuss the joy of birding. I'm your host, Guillaume Doerig. Our guest today is a prominent wildlife guide and co-owner of Echidna Walkabout Nature Tours, a social enterprise that runs wildlife tours with an emphasis on conservation action all over Australia, from planting trees and removing weeds for koalas in Victoria, to counting shorebirds in the top end and ocean birds at Exmouth, WA, to removing ghost nets from the beaches in East Gippsland. Sounds amazing. In 2014, Echidna Walkabout Nature Tours won the World Responsible Travel Award for Wildlife Conservation. In 2015, she and her partner also started the Koala Clancy Foundation, a not-for-profit dedicated to saving wild koalas west of Melbourne. She's the president of that foundation as well. She has also started several Facebook groups, such as Mallacoota Birds and Women Birders Australia. So, lots to talk about today, guys. So please welcome the wonderful Janine DUFFY. Hi, Janine, how are you?
G'day, Guillaume. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, all is well, and I'm excited because at the time of recording, hopefully things will be opening up really soon for Melbourne and Victoria as a whole. So I'm excited.
Yes.
So yeah, hopefully we can get back out there. So let's jump right into the episode. I like to start the episodes that I do with my wonderful guests by asking where they get the joy in birding. What brings you joy about birding?
I thought about this a lot, and the first thing that popped into my head was pelagics. And I thought, why does that pop into my head so much? But I love being on the ocean for the whole day. Mm-hmm. And I think in some ways it summarises the joy of birding for me. It puts you into places that you may not otherwise go. And it gives you something to do that makes you stay there. And I think you just absorb a place so much better when you've got a reason to stop there and do something. But at the moment for me, pelagics are just the ultimate. Eaglehawk, Tassie, I'm dying to go back.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. I agree. And, pelagics are special because they, like, in no other way, they amplify the joy of birding to such an extent that, you're out there in the middle of in the middle of the ocean, and it amplifies the feelings that you feel, when you can get that feeling also in the outback when you're in these vast landscapes. But going on a pelagic is different because it's just so, you feel so small, but in a good way, I think. And so I agree. I think it really does. It really speaks to the joy of birding, those experiences. Yeah.
It thrusts you into the environment of the birds, and you just feel like you're in another world. I think Australians are surrounded by so much ocean, and yet most of us don't see it very well for most of our lives, And a pelagic gives you an opportunity to see the ocean. Even if you were not interested in birds, I think you could enjoy a pelagic trip because it's a different view of Australia.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree with that. My wife, actually, she's not a birder as such, but we went on a pelagic trip from the coast of Chile. I lived in Chile with her for a few years, and we went from Quintero, which is on the Humboldt, and it's absolutely amazing. And she, as a non-birder, she really enjoyed it as well, and this feeling of waking up early at the crack of dawn and just getting out there, it's just absolutely great. And yeah, just joy. Joy is the best word, That's why I came up with this podcast, because it's joy and how we feel it.
Yes.
And I wanted also to ask, how did you get into birding? How long have you been into birding?
I took it very slowly. I got into plants first, and then into koalas. And then I sort of tried to tick off everything except birds until finally birds got me.
Right.
And I'm so happy they did. But I think I perceived them as being difficult at first. You do need a bit of decent equipment to really make bird watching work. And I didn't have that equipment at first.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a rescue magpie who was the baby of a pair in our local park, and she fell out of her nest. I mean, she probably threw herself out of her nest. Being a magpie, they throw themselves into life before they're quite ready.
Yeah.
She came down, broke her leg, had other problems, all these sorts of things that we cared for her for a little while. And I think something gelled at that time. I saw into a bird's mind. I saw the emotions on her face, if you can call it a face. With a bird, it's kind of a different structure. So I saw the flash of intelligence across the eyes. I saw the fondness and the fun and the excitement of life, and the wildness in her. And even though, even though her chances of survival in the wild were very slim, she was willing to give it a shot. She was determined to get back out there as fast as she could, and nothing I could do would have prevented that. She was going to throw herself into life, and I just admire that kind of determination to be wild and free.
Yeah, wow, that's fantastic. That's really interesting, because I was also going to mention that it's quite a peculiar path, because what I find in my experience usually happens is that birders start only with birds, and then they start to get interested in mammals, frogs, other things. So it's interesting that it was kind of the opposite for you, where you kind of were into other stuff and then you got into birds. That's interesting.
Yeah, the plants are still a really important part of my life. And I will often note on my eBird list, what plants are flowering, that kind of thing. I find the connection between birds and their food to be particularly compelling. And I really wish we could put more of that information in with our list. But then, of course, we've only got so much time.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dear listeners and dear viewers, it's nice to have you with us. Remember that you can watch this episode on YouTube or on any of your favourite streaming platforms for podcasts. Back to the episode. And I also wanted to get into your enterprises. Firstly, Echidna Walkabout Nature Tours. That sounds like an amazing thing, and my wife studied ecotourism in Chile, and so we love that sort of thing. So tell me a bit about how that started.
It started with my partner, Roger. He worked for the Australian Conservation Foundation back in the 80s when they were fighting for the forests of East Gippsland. And at the time, there was a lot of talk about ecotourism replacing the economic advantage of logging. And he just decided someone had to do it. And he wanted to do it. He wanted to get out there and take people to see these magnificent forests that he'd fought so hard and so long to have protected as national parks. So we started our business life going to places like Errinundra National Park.
Oh, yeah.
Point Hicks and Wingan Inlet became my backyard. I used to take people on wilderness coast walks for 10 days along the coast from French's Narrows at Marlow to Mallacoota. And one of the first birds I remember actually identifying was a ground parrot. I know, how lucky was I?
Wow. Yeah, that's a pretty great first bird, yeah.
I know. Hooded plovers, were kind of a normal part of my day. And I wasn't even a birder then. I wish I was. Ooh.
Wow.
What else I might have seen if I was looking.
Absolutely.
So,
that's amazing.
I know. Spectacular. We always wanted to do more than just contribute financially to economies. Although, that's significant in itself, it doesn't make for a great story. And we kept looking for ways to do more, to get people involved more with conservation. And then we eventually came up with an idea to help the koalas in the Uyangs by removing weeds. Every time we took someone there, we asked them to remove a weed. Now, some of these people, Guillaume, who were coming with us, international travellers staying at the Park Hyatt, they came out with all of their expensive gear, wearing their expensive clothes. They had spent an absolute fortune on this trip. And we'd get them down on their hands and knees pulling out a weed for a koala.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? They loved it as much as everybody did. Everybody loved it.
Wow.
We discovered a thing about travel that we didn't even fully realise. And that is that everyone wants to be a part of something that's doing some good. And that's something you have to earn. It's not something that can be handed to you on a platter just because you paid. So if you pull out a weed and help save a koala, if you remove a bit of ghost net from the coast and help thus save a sea turtle or a dolphin, if you plant a tree that creates a forest for a koala to live in, you're part of a special community that's done something amazing. And every time that comes up in the news or on an email or on a Facebook post, you feel like you have invested in that thing and you're part of that.
Yes, yeah.
Now, knowing this, what could we do with this knowledge? We could do so much more than we're doing, really, as a country, as a community, to do some good for birds.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. And that ties into, I suppose, so that activity of going to the Uyangs and pulling out weeds and caring for the koalas, that's part of the Koala Clancy Foundation, or is that separate? Tell me about how that started as well.
Actually, Koala Clancy Foundation came out of that. So
okay.
we started. Yeah, we were doing it with Echidna Walkabout with 8,000 people a year. So that's a significant number of weeds. And we cleared an entire home range for one koala so that he could live in it. And he did stay, which was really good. And then we cleared his girlfriends, and then we cleared his grandma's home range. And then we just kept on going. Everyone pulled out 10 or 20 weeds each. No one ever pulled out one. Wow. It was too much. They didn't want to stop. And so we realised that there was potential to start doing something like this with locals as well. And that's where Koala Clancy Foundation was formed, because locals are a different, locals doing conservation work. That's a different situation in many ways.
Why is that?
Several different reasons. Firstly, these are people who you can affect over the long term.
Yeah.
So they can come back again. They can learn more in depth. You know, they might want to know the difference between a river red gum and a yellow gum. And they'll keep that knowledge and they'll keep on using it and passing it on. International travellers, I mean, they're not likely to really care about that level of detail unless they're botanists. Because they're not going to use it again. Locals do. They really want to know. They want to see the scratches on the trees that the koalas make, because next time they come for a walk, they'll see it and go, oh, yeah, I know that thing. Some of our volunteers have learnt so much about nature. They've gotten into birding, have gotten into plants and things like that as a result of starting this process. So,
yeah.
The other thing is it's extremely difficult to convince a Melburnian to spend $270 to go out for a day with us where they're going to pull out weeds. Isn't it?
Yes.
Are you with me?
I'm with you. Yeah. It must be. So how do you tackle that problem?
You don't. You subsidise it. So we started at $20 and ramped it up to $30. which doesn't even cover the costs of running it. But don't worry, it's had so many other benefits, and we've got plenty of donors who top up the difference in what it costs us to run the day and the cost of contributing. I think this happens all over the world. Locals tend not to pay for experiences in their backyard.
Yeah.
It's not that they don't think it's valuable. It's just a human nature thing.
Right.
So the same local will spend an absolute mint to go on a trip in the Northern Territory or the Kimberley, and they're not always getting value for money, I don't think. Yeah, some of the bigger companies, they charge. Oh, yes.
Yeah, for sure.
And you can get a much better service from a smaller company.
More personalised and, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a matter of the money. It's a proximity thing, and I think it's just, one of those things.
For sure. Cool. Yeah, absolutely. I want to loop back on the koalas and the yuyangs, because while we were emailing back and forth, you sent me a couple of links, and I was blown away by the fact that brown-headed honeyeaters, they pick fur from the backs of koalas to line their nests. That's mind-blowing. Tell me about that.
Oh, I know. We started seeing it right from the get-go when we were researching koalas in the yuyangs. In the early years, Guillaume, this will kill you, it used to be black-chinned honeyeaters.
Oh, goodness me, yeah.
As many of them as the brown-headed honeyeaters were taking fur. In fact, it was one of the best ways to see a black-chinned honeyeater was when you were near a koala and a bird started fluttering around, you'd look, because there's the two species that do it that we've noticed in the yuyangs. The black-chinned are very rarely seen there now, but the brown-headed are still seen in good numbers.
Yeah.
And if you're watching a koala for half an hour, at almost any time of year, there's a decent chance you will see this behaviour. It happens all year. Why are they nesting all year? Brown-headed honeyeaters? What? But they seem to have a very extended nesting period, because we've recorded this in just about every month of the year.
Yeah. That's so amazing. It's really, and you've got some really good, I'll put some links in the show notes so people can click around and have a look. But you've got some amazing footage, they just, and sometimes the baby koalas get a bit agitated. It's absolutely great. I love it. It's just so interesting.
We haven't been able to work out whether certain koalas kind of like it and certain koalas hate it. And
how do you measure? You can't measure that, really.
No, it's not a controlled experiment, is it?
You can't have a satisfaction, level of koala satisfaction. So,
no, and whether it's just the mood the koala's in on the day, or how fast she might have been snoozing.
Yeah.
Where they've got them. There's so many interesting things in that, but it makes me wonder, if an arboreal mammal like koala was removed from the forest, i.e. went extinct from the forest, how does that affect the health of those brown-headed honeyeater babies? You could say they could get the fur from elsewhere, but wallabies and kangaroos are on the ground. Possums are nocturnal. Which other diurnal arboreal mammal can they get high quality fur to line their nests from if koalas are not present? Does it matter? Maybe their nests are fine without it, but it'd be really interesting, interesting topic for a study, huh?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, these things, they just, I think often people don't remember or don't realize or don't know that these relationships form over millions of years, these intricate ecosystem, almost like clockwork kind of thing, where each little part is so important. And that's just amazing. That was a highlight of my week to see that video where it just goes and and I didn't know about it, and I'm not sure if that's because I was ignorant about it, or it's mostly widely known in the Australian birding community because I'm not from Australia, but it's just so good. And so let's push on. I wanted to briefly mention before we started recording, you have quite a lot of video content on YouTube, which I'll also put a link in the show notes to, where it's just a great tool to promote things, isn't it? Video, and because it's so engaging, and and you mentioned before we started recording again that some of it's quite dated. So do you have plans to kind of give that a kick again and start doing that again, or?
I don't know, really. I think we probably will. But COVID and before that, the bushfires has had such a big impact that I don't think I'm up to my game anymore. I might be when we come out of this crazy situation. I do think making content available is really important. I'm a big believer in it, and I love platforms like eBird and the Atlas of Living Australia, iNaturalist Australia it is now. I love Xeno Canto with all of their bird recordings.
Yeah.
I love the way this information is being made available to all of us. And to scientists as well, to make the most of what we do so that our passion, our hobby has some benefit for the things we love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. And and video is so good for that, It's good. It's I don't think there's anything that beats video to transmit a message.
Podcasts.
Well,
yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
It's the new YouTube.
It is a new YouTube, and this is going to be on YouTube as well, because I'm recording the video too. But that's right. I think most people actually listen to podcasts while they're driving or while they're gardening, or just kind of doing anything. And it's such a great medium because and I'm still quite new to it. So I'm learning and. But yeah, there's so many ways to communicate important information, and also I just want to touch on one thing. One of the videos on YouTube, there's a shot of you drawing a koala, and it's an amazing drawing. Do you illustrate things as well?
No, I used to, and it was a really big part of my life actually, and I think probably photographers would feel the same. It helps if you know your subject quite well. When you're drawing or trying to convey an art piece about it, you maybe look at it in more detail than others.
Yeah.
So I looked at koalas as an artist looks at koalas, and I noticed that their noses were different. They have unique markings inside their nostrils. I noticed this when I was about 28 years old, and I started writing down some notes about this kind of thing. Spoke to a few people in the koala world, and they said, "We've never heard of that before." And I said, "Really? Isn't it obvious?" They're like, "No, it's not." Turns out no one had actually documented that before. I don't know if anyone had ever noticed it, but it certainly wasn't in the scientific literature at that time. And it's only just recently now started to creep in to the scientific literature because a few unis are using it for their studies.
Right. That's unbelievable that it wasn't in the scientific literature. That's unbelievable. And well done for finding that. That's an amazing achievement.
Just shows what ordinary people can do, really. I'm not a scientist. So, I mean, you look and you write notes. Occasionally you come across something that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that highlights the fact that, myself included, and I'm sure other people feel this, that, it's like, we'll let the scientists do the groundbreaking discoveries, and we'll just go birding, you know, and not do anything scientific. But you know, that's not the case. You know, you know, do you know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They can use what we do. If we do it in a way that's useful, and that's provable,
Yeah.
they can certainly use what we do. So the videos you were talking about, one of them shows a koala licking the trunk of a tree as it rains. And I was contacted, I think, 2 years ago by a scientist at the University of Sydney saying, have you got more? Because we've only just heard about this and we'd like to write a paper about it. And I said, you bet I've got more. So Dr. Valentina Malla used, most of the paper actually was made of our Yuyang's koala observations licking the trunk of the tree as the water fell down, and we had video evidence, we had photographic evidence, the whole works. We had dates, GPS locations, trees, the whole works. So I think it's really useful for ordinary people to write these things down. If you've got the time, you just never know when it's going to be useful.
Yeah, yeah. And I think if we take the birding perspective, I think eBird is the big thing at the moment, and has been for maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years now, where, you know, ordinary citizens can contribute and just you know, document what they see. And you mentioned that you love eBird. Why do you love eBird?
Oh, eBird's fabulous. I loved Eremia. Do you know what Eremia? Yeah, great. Yeah. That helped me so much in my birding in the early days when I started getting into it. You know, helpful people, and also just making a list really helps you get better at what you're doing. And then, which of course is an Australian idea, Eremia birds. And then when that became part of the platform that became eBird, when they went global, they used and credited a lot of the Eremia birds platform.
Oh, okay.
And they immediately exported all of our data straight into eBird, which was fabulous because we didn't have to do it all again. And it meant that Australia was a major player in eBird right from the start. So I got used to that style of doing a kind of a patch, a hotspot list, very early in the piece, and it's just stayed with me. It works for me. I go for a walk up the hill at home, and I do a quick eBird. It's almost second nature. It's a bit like breathing and, you know, drinking water. It's just part of the day.
Yeah, no, I see what you mean. I'm the same. I just love it.
Are you?
Yeah, even like the incidental, you know, when I'm driving, or when I, you know, it's mostly when my wife's in the car with me. It's like, oh look, there's a brown falcon. Can you just make a list quickly? Just to keep the lists, to keep my lists completely impeccably up to date. But anyway, that's something else. And so let's move on to something that I'm interested in talking about. So so you are the creator of a couple of Facebook groups. So what are those Facebook groups, and why did you start them?
Mallacoota birds I started first, mostly because we go to Mallacoota a lot. It occurred to me that there was a bit of a disconnect between the locals, who could potentially see almost anything in their backyard, and the visiting birders from Melbourne, who, not all from Melbourne, sorry, from all over Victoria, but a lot of them from Melbourne, who love to go to Mallacoota and see birds, and often see different things to what the locals are seeing in their backyards.
Yeah.
I was particularly obsessed by the idea of rose-crowned fruit doves. One day they're going to show up there at someone's bird feeder. It hasn't happened yet, but they have been seen in a couple of places in Victoria, mostly dead.
Okay, really?
Yeah, 2 records of dead birds in places like Meetung, where they've managed to fly across the whole of Victoria before dying out a window in Meechung.
Where's that? Where's that?
Lakes Entrance area.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So they haven't been picked up, of course. Now, those 2 rose-crowned fruit doves are not the only 2 that have entered the state. Another one made it alive to Tasmania, was photographed and listed and everything down there by all the birders, managed to make it somehow across Victoria without any of us seeing it. I'm incensed by this.
Wow, that's amazing. Really, I didn't know about that record in Tasmania. That's amazing. Yeah.
A birdie. And it made it across Bass Strait. And then what happened to it? So I'm particularly interested in pigeons. I just love pigeons, and they're really strong flyers, of course, and they go in search of fruit, so they could show up anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you're on the record. You officially called it. There's the rose-crowned fruit dove that's going to get to Victoria, so it's on the record.
Yeah, some other bugger will find it, won't they? It's not going to be me, I guarantee. But I don't mind. As long as someone finds it, I'll just be happy.
Oh, that's yeah.
But Mallacoota birds has actually been really good because the thing I hoped that a backyard bird would show up, that it'd be something special, has actually happened. So last year, the white-eared monarch, an absolute classic on the page, a local basically said, haven't seen this bird before. Does anyone know what it is? And I could hear the chins hitting the floor right across Melbourne, looking at this photograph of a white-eared monarch never recorded for Victoria before. Isn't that fantastic?
It's brilliant. I absolutely love that. Yeah. I went to look at the post when you mentioned that. I looked for the post. And all these comments like, "Wow, huge, amazing!" And I love that it was the person a birder who found it? Not at all.
No, likes birds. So sorry, I should say yes. Everyone's a birder who likes birds, but not a serious lister or anything. Seems like chuffed as anything. He was thrilled to bits.
Wow. Yeah.
It's just a fantastic outcome. And then it happened again the other day with the spectacled monarch, but this time it wasn't a local. It was a visiting birder who found it because they went there because the local admin had found the striated heron the week before. So it's kind of working, it brings people together. It's great for tourism because birdwatchers are fantastic tourists, very sustainable, come at all times of year, outside of the main season, stay for a fairly long time compared to a lot of tourists, a lot of visitors, and don't drink heavily and make loud noise and have parties late into the night, which means they're very nice neighbours generally. They get up early in the morning and they go out all day and then they go to bed early, which is fantastic because they're knackered.
Yeah.
Great tourists, fantastic tourists to have.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with every word. Yeah, it's it's a special group of tourists, but it's a sizable one, and especially when you take into consideration the international component, the global component, and that's what's great with birding. It's global, It's really cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Mallacoota is the real deal too. I mean, imagine how many people would have been there if we were not in lockdown to see that spectacled monarch.
Wow, it did double the population of Mallacoota, probably.
It could do.
To stay up to date with new episodes of the Birding Today podcast, please follow Birding Today on Facebook and Instagram, as well as subscribing to the YouTube channel.
The other group I started is Women Birders Australia, and that's 2 years old now. So I contacted a couple of women that I knew in the birding community and suggested it. They loved the idea. Everyone we spoke to loved the idea. And and it's now got 1,020 members, and it's a fantastic community. Really, really fun to be part of. But it's just women and people of non-binary people too.
Okay, and tell me, so what led you to think about starting that and start it? What was the chain of events that led to that decision and to that realization that you needed a group like that?
When I started entering the birding community, I was really shocked because it appears to be all men. If you look at the sort of leadership of the birding community, the hobby that is birding, the admins of the groups on social media and the other groups as well in birding, they're all men. There's an occasional woman, but I'd come from a very gender diverse world that was generally young people. My organisation, the Echidna Walkabout, we were always 50-50 men, women. Sometimes we went over to 60% women and 40% men, but it usually swapped around a fair bit. And so I was used to a fairly nice sort of environment where women were, treated with respect, without question, And then I came into the birding community and I saw a lack of representation. And it's not just women either. It's cultural diversity is lacking as well. I'm not used to seeing so few Black faces and Asian faces and Aboriginal faces in a community. We live in a beautifully diverse society, and I feel uncomfortable in such a white world, to be perfectly honest. And I sort of coped. I dealt with it. But then I spent a bit of time birding in Uganda a couple of years ago, which was amazing, but it wasn't as much fun for me as it was for the male members of the group, because I was constantly the outsider. And I was a serious birder when I was there. To go on a private guided bird trip with a bird guide we had particularly employed, and to be ignored, not spoken to at all by him. He didn't care if I got onto the bird at all. He took my male friend up to see things, engaged with him, chatted with him in a way that was just so obviously he wasn't directing that at me. I was so angry because I was paying half, and he was expecting to be tipped at the end of the day. And I'm thinking, why? Why should I tip this person who's treated me incredibly rudely? And what he didn't realise is that the main reason he was being employed is because I was there. My male companion was our tour leader, and he was loving it as well. But if I hadn't been there, we wouldn't have been doing the trip at all. So I was furious.
Right.
And at other times during the trip, I heard things from our local guides that truly nauseating for a woman to have to hear. Things like when our lovely tour leader said, at home I prefer the African way. When I go home, my wife meets me on her knees. And you go, what? She's on her knees when he comes in the door.
Wow.
Now, I have every respect for cultural differences, but this is not something a woman tourist wants to hear from her guide. I feel like saying, keep that to yourself. You've just made me extremely uncomfortable to be here working with you, to know that you think that's a better way.
Yeah,
surely, you know, and I don't think, you know, even if that wasn't directed at me, how does that make people feel? They certainly, I did not feel as comfortable with him after that time.
And so how did that translate to your return to Australia? Did that in any way influence what you saw in Uganda to when you came back and after that experience, and then you came back here?
Yes, because towards the end of that Uganda trip, this same tour leader, who was a lovely bloke, by the way, I made it clear to him that I was feeling uncomfortable being constantly surrounded by men. And he made an effort to find a woman bird guide for me, which was really fantastic. And he is a lovely guy, and he really was trying to learn, I think, you know, a way of dealing with this, which is great. And I actually realised that it was easier to find a woman bird guide in Uganda than it was in Australia, because they had created a group called, I think, Uganda Women Birders. And you could just go to this site and just find out the location of where you're going and find a woman guide who was a fantastic guide, a fantastic bird guide. And then I came back to Australia and realised that it would be just as hard to find a woman bird guide in Australia as it was in Uganda. In fact, maybe harder, because we don't have a group. There are women bird guides in Australia. There are fantastic women bird guides here, but they're not a majority by any means. They're a serious minority in the bird guiding world. And I thought, you know, for all our wealth and education, for all our cultural differences, we probably weren't much better off, were we? Yeah. And here I am trying to employ women as bird guides. And gee, they were hard to find. Very hard to find. So I thought, well, why shouldn't we have a group like that?
Ideas to help bring more diversity to birding. What have you thought about it? Do you have any ideas about how to do so?
Well, I think we need to think about why diversity is important in any community, because some people wouldn't see it as being a problem. I think diversity in any community is important because it makes the community strong and very vital when you've got a range of views and attitudes and styles of doing things. But also, it's a responsibility. If you've got 50% of your members who are women and their voice is so tiny, I had a look through some of the Facebook groups, and men's posts were outnumbering women's by 4 to 1. There is something wrong. You are not representing your community, and that's just not right. You know, if 50% of your community were Aboriginal and their voice was not getting heard, that would be wrong. This is your people, and not only do they have a right to be heard, they should be heard because they've got something good to say. So I really feel that women have got a lot to give to birding. I feel like our voice needs to be amplified. I would prefer not to have a separate group that's only for women, but unfortunately it appeared the only way we were going to make a change. In the group, we empower and amplify women. We search for talent, you know, we help, we encourage, we give each other big group hugs in a way, if you can, something like that. When we ID a bird, if we're asked for ID, we say, I think it is. Because you know what? Not a single one of us knows that for sure. And I put that challenge out to the entire birding community. If you haven't caught that bird and done its DNA, you don't actually know for sure either. Birding's a strange field where the idea of a bird seems to be sorted out by consensus a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Because no one actually has proof that that bird is that bird. And if the consensus is being reached by the most prominent members, and those most prominent members are all men, white men, then it's intimidating for absolutely everyone else in it. So I don't know, I think we can make it less intimidating. So that's why I think diversity is important. I think how do we address it? I think we need to amplify and support those who are from the outsiders groups, from the groups that are underrepresented. We need to amplify their voices. So the way to do that is when you see a post by someone whose name is clearly not Anglo-Australian, give it a like, make a comment. Now, you might call that reverse discrimination. It's not, because there's no such thing as reverse discrimination. These people have been discriminated against their entire lives. All you're doing is topping up for the people who won't bother to give that person support because something about them appears to be outside of the norm. And do it publicly, don't do it privately. Privately doesn't help. Public is what it needs to be. So share those things around and just think of it as you topping up for someone else who's not going to bother, really.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And we've said on this podcast before that birding is as much about people as it is about birds, and I'm starting to believe that more and more. Because without people there is no birding. So.
For sure.
So I suppose it's an aspect of also having as much networks as possible around the whole community, and I just I came on to talk to you, and I don't have any real insights or any particular opinion, but I just wanted to offer the platform so we could discuss it. And you're free to put this on the Women Birders Facebook group as a link, and
I will.
And hopefully it helps. Right.
Yeah, but I've got a few other ideas of tips, Guillaume, if you've got time.
Of course, yeah. No worries. We can. Yeah.
I think it helps if people understand the challenges of the underrepresented. So, and one of the challenges is when there's no role models. When you see a community that is entirely different to you, you don't feel as welcome in it. And no matter how nice everyone is to you, you feel like an outsider straight away. So I say to the white people out there, can you imagine walking into a room in the Northern Territory that's full of Aboriginal people? Absolutely full. There's not a single white face in there. Do you feel comfortable? If you do, great, good on you. But plenty of us, if you're completely honest, wouldn't immediately feel comfortable. You would just sort of have a bit of a look around. It's not racism. It's just difference.
Yeah.
It's totally natural. We do it no matter whether people are black or white or Asian or whatever, women or men. If you walk into a room and there's no one like you, you do feel like a bit of an outsider. So when I looked at all the groups involved with bird watching, when I went out to the Western Treatment Plant and nearly everyone I saw was a man, I didn't feel particularly comfortable.
Why not? I'm interested in why. Why didn't you?
I was in my 30s when I started birding quite actively, and there was also an age difference there too. But also women are taught to protect themselves against large groups of men. And for very good reason. They have to. So if you can imagine a 30-something woman wanting to get ahead in birding, wanting to seek a friendship with someone who's really good at what they do, do you think we can seek a friendship with a top male birder? No, not easily. If you do, you might be seen as being too forward. You might get sexually harassed. There will be jokes. There will be innuendo. Now, it may not happen as much to me now. I'm not 30-something anymore. But I can't say that I'm all that much more comfortable to just hook up with a male birder and say, let's go birding together. Look, that's not sexism. That's just reality, I mean, they've probably got a wife. I've got a partner. You don't want to put up with the innuendo, really. So it means that the only people we can make friendships with who are prominent in our field are women who are at the top of their field. And where are they? Now, I know where they are now. I've found them. And we've brought together a lot of them in Women Birders. So we know who we can go to, who can be our role models.
Yeah.
And that's if we do nothing else as a group, and we've done that. We've brought those role models together, and that has an enormous effect, an enormous positive effect. I would love to see the same happen with cultural diversity in birding in Australia, because there's not nearly enough of those role models either. So, Aboriginal birders, Asian birders, gay birders, everything. We need disabled birders. We need those people at the tops of their field, and you only get to that by being mentored and being taught. You don't really get to that level if you're on your own, do you?
Yeah, that's all really, really interesting, and yeah, we could go on for hours, which is which is actually another sentence that I find myself saying a lot on this podcast now. But yeah, I think we can leave it open-ended, and there's no need to kind of come to a stop to this, because I was talking to Grace Lewis on episode 4, which isn't out at that time of recording, but it will be out on the 29th.
Right. Yeah.
And after we finished recording, we started talking about this, like post recording, and saying, oh yeah, and she said, oh, I don't remember exactly how it went, but I told her, yeah, I was going to ask you about that, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to talk about it, how you felt, because she's doing a big year at the moment.
Yeah.
And so I didn't feel quite prepared enough, or maybe she didn't, and we didn't get around to it. But I'm sure there's lots of room for discussion, absolutely, and yeah, safety I think is a big one, especially in Grace's case, where she's doing a big year on her own, and she did say, like, oh yeah, sometimes it's difficult, because you got to kind of go out on your own, and yeah. It
really is. It's a serious thing, and I think there's a lot of prominent birders out there who do not want it to be a male-dominated field.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's important also to realize, there's not. It's not. I wouldn't call it like a conflict or a war as such, because there's so many amazing male birders too, who I'm sure are for this as well. And yeah, so that's good. Do you have any more thoughts? Any more thoughts about that?
It's funny saying that. I often judge a birder's skill by how little they need to intimidate others about it. met some absolutely fabulous birders in my history, absolutely fabulous. And you don't need to be a bully. You don't need to have arguments really over ideas to be a good birder.
Yeah, for sure.
In fact, the best often aren't. And there's nothing wrong with saying, I think it is. Softening the blow, I think, with people is really helpful. It was interesting, an article I found about gender differences in birding found that women are just as serious about their birding as men, but their reasons for doing it sometimes a bit different. The way they do it is sometimes a bit different. That personal enrichment, recreation, that kind of thing are very important to women in birding, and I would agree with that. And that demonstrating your ability was quite important to men, but it wasn't particularly important to women. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something to keep in mind, is that just because a woman birder doesn't insist on it being X or Y, just because she's willing to accept, others' views, other opinions, doesn't mean she's uncertain about what she saw. It's not a sign of weakness to say, oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that. It doesn't mean she's wrong.
I actually think it's a sign of strength to do those things, to come upon realizing that someone else could know more or be right or have more insight than you. I think that's not, it's the opposite of weakness, I think. But yeah, I was thinking about just before what you're saying is when when you see a bird and about IDing and being sure, it's also about the language you use, I think, it's really interesting. But yeah, there's lots more room to talk about stuff like this, and I'd love to have you on again at some point, and maybe with another guest at the same time, so we can have kind of a three-way chat. I'd like to ask you some wrap-up questions, because I love doing this. I love doing this because it's as a host, I can see the whole spectrum of different reactions from people.
Yes.
So, what's your favorite bird?
Oh, well, having already mentioned one that's particularly important to me in East Gippsland, I won't mention that one again, that rose-crowned one, although it's very, very important to me. There is a bird called a Chatham albatross. It has got to be the most gorgeous looking albatross. I mean, this thing leaves a Buller's albatross for dead when it comes to gorgeousness. And that's really saying something, because Bullers, now I might be a little bit biased about that. I don't know, because I've seen a few Bullers and Chatham I haven't seen. I think you have to go to some awful tiny little island to see them off South America or something, or go spend a lot of time out in the Southern Ocean. So I would love to see one day. There's a beautiful book I've got by Tui de Roy, Albatross, Their Wings, Their Ways, I think it was. And that, it's got some photographs on their breeding island. They're this beautiful dark grey head. They've got all the elegance and power of a shy albatross, but with this Buller's colouring. Oh my God. And they're pretty rare, so yeah, I'd love to see that.
Beauty. Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, well, I hope you do. And, with, like I said, things opening up, we'll be able to do all those trips again. And yeah. Well, so I think we're out of time now. So we'll have to wrap this episode up, which I think will be longer than usual, but that's really good. A great conversation requires two people who are engaged in it and willing to discuss alternatives. And I think that's what we've did. That's what we've done today. So it's been great, Janine. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for being willing to talk about it, particularly the diversity aspect. And thank you for putting this together. I'm sure it's quite a lot of work. And I know you're finding time to do this, which you probably have other things going on, but I appreciate it. I really do.
Well, I appreciate your time as well. So thanks so much, Janine. See you soon, I hope.
Bye.
See ya. You've been listening to the Birding Today podcast. New episodes are released every Friday, and if you'd like to get in touch, just write an email to birdingtoday@gmail.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.